I remember one Tuesday, my boss calls me down to this cafe across the street, and I didn't know what it was over, but I'm sure it's like just a kind of production thing or whatever. And he sits me down, and he just before we say anything, he just goes, "We're letting you go."
Really, right off the bat, he doesn't ease into it or anything.
Just first thing he says.
Cold.
And I remember the room just swam. I nearly fell out of my seat because it was like there was no indication that this was going to happen. There was like all targets were hit. Everyone was like happy. It was like the job was moving along fine. I couldn't get my head around this, you know?
Did he give you any reasons?
He gave me some very vague reasons about me not knowing enough about business.
But you built this whole department from the ground pretty much.
And that's what I kind of felt. I was like, but okay, no, I don't know. Like when he said about business, he literally meant the stuff they were teaching in their course. And I was like, but you hired me for production and you've never...
Yeah, it's not your job to know the material of the course.
Yeah, and I'd never at any time during the year I worked there did he say, I need you to start studying this stuff so you understand it. Like it was never that. And I realized what he had done was he had brought me in to build their pipeline. And then as soon as he felt like he could let me go, as soon as I had put that pipeline in place and it was sufficient, he was like, don't need this anymore. At the time, I didn't know that. It was devastating.
Yeah, it sucks, man.
This was the worst fire. Like I had to go back up to my team. I had to call them around and be like, listen, I've been let go. I started crying halfway through it. Had to pack up my JoJo's Bizarre Adventure figures. And it was just... It was the worst. It was...
Yeah, that's pretty brutal, man.
Yeah, and I just remember sitting in a park afterwards and just staring into this lake and just being like, what the fuck am I gonna do?
Well, because you built something.
Yeah.
Out of you're attached to it, obviously.
Being separated from my employees genuinely felt... I felt like a dad in a divorce who couldn't see his kids anymore. It was just obliterating, you know, when you and I was young, I was 24, 25 maybe. I'd never been fired from anything. I couldn't believe it. And I could tell the guy felt guilty about it. They gave me a really generous severance and all this kind of stuff. But fuck, what was I gonna do? Because now I had this apartment and my girlfriend was doing an internship. I had to step up and support us. And so my only choice was to go back to my old job, which I really didn't want to do. Oh my God, I'll never forget the first day back there, right? There was this guy who used to work there and he was a nice guy, but he had zero self-awareness. But he used to have this bit where he'd pull down his zipper and he'd poke a dildo out through the bottom of his zipper.
What?
You could not get away with that shit now.
At work?
At work, in front of everyone, right?
Why is there a dildo at work in the first place?
That's this was a small studio that grew into a much larger studio, right?
Yeah, I mean, I get that. Yeah.
I remember for my first stint there, I was like, wow, I don't know how this guy gets away with this. I don't know how management or HR hasn't been called up multiple times. And I remember my first day there, I'm just staring into space in front of me, just being like, I can't believe I'm back here. I can't believe I'm doing this again. And this guy with the dildo hanging out just walks into my field of vision. And it was the grimmest, most apocalyptic thing I could have seen in that moment.
Icing on the cake.
Yeah. And I spent about a year there. Every week I was terrified I was going to get fired. Whenever my team lead was like, could I have a word with you? I was always like, this is it. I'm fucking gone.
PTSD.
I knew I had some demons to fight. I knew that internally I was not okay at all. And a lot of the times back then, what I do whenever I felt like I was not in a great spot is I do a little traveling by myself. I live in Ireland, and so I decided I was gonna take a trip to London. This is something that I really love doing. I love traveling to cities by myself. I can't really do it anymore now. It was something I'd kind of just go and disappear and just be nobody for a couple of days, and it was always very healthy. I felt like it always gave me some perspective on things. But this trip was kind of different because I was just so fucked up at that point. I felt really physically weak and I couldn't pin it down. And so then one morning I woke up in my I woke up at like 3 a.m. My chest was beating harder than it had ever beat in my life, pumping sweat. There was a film of liquid all over my body. I dove out of bed and I was like, oh shit, am I having a heart attack? Like, what is happening? I nearly called an ambulance. And at one point I looked out the window and it was like the weirdest like psychological effect. My brain was interpreting the darkness outside as like a solid shape. That's how kind of out of it I was. Later I'd find out was that what was happening to me is I was having a really intense panic attack. I thought I had had panic attacks before, but they were like nothing compared to this. I spent the rest of that trip kind of just on the verge of like trying to consider whether I should like go to a hospital or not. I ended up not doing it, and what I ended up doing was trying to find different ways to like distract my mind from the idea of panic or stressing out, you know? And so one of the ways I did that is that I started writing a script for a YouTube video that I'd wanted to make for a really long time. And at this point, I'd never made a YouTube video. I'd never written a script. I'd never done anything. And that ended up being the first draft of why you should watch Hunter x Hunter, which is the first video on my channel.
Whoa, you're still here. Click up here to subscribe and click here to watch some of our other videos. You dingus.